Okay, this is the second video about sales pipelines in our sales pipeline series. So it's such a big subject, such an important subject for sales that it's hard to explain in one very short video. So this is the second piece about what flows out of the pipeline. So really quickly, I want to remind people that the pipeline is you got a bunch of unidentified customers in your market up here. And this is a tiered system of how they flow through your sales process. How good are you at advancing each target down to closed and having them pay you? And this is tiered in a way that allows you to track progress. One of the things you're tracking is your ratios about how good you are at moving companies from level to level. You can look at percentages and know where you're good or bad. And we've also discussed the subject of dashboards in a separate video, which is what do you do with those ratios? How do you use them to diagnose problems and to tell where you're succeeding and failing? So there's other things besides these ratios that flow out of this process. Specifically though, watching these numbers interact over time, both this month and then over a series of months, trending, helps you identify where in your company things are going right and wrong. And if you want to learn more about that, watch the dashboard video. But that's essentially what's happening is you're using this as a diagnosis tool. So what do you do with that information? What flows out of a good sales pipeline? These are some of the major things and some of the basic things that flow out of a sales pipeline. The first is the ratios that we discussed. You should be able to know what you're good and bad at inside of your sales process. So in this case, 40% of the people who you talk to turned into meetings. 60-some-odd% over here turned into second meetings where you met a decision maker, but then only 20% made a verbal commitment to use your product. So you're not so good here, you're pretty good here, you're very good in this stage right here. So that's sort of how you use the ratios or how you look at that to know what you're good and bad at. And so then what flows out of that is diagnosis. How do I improve? So in this case I'd say, geez, first of all, we got to get better at contacting new accounts. We got to do that faster. And this is okay, I'm not so concerned. We're doing great here. We need to work on closure. I'd be teaching the skill of closing. How do you drive to a close? So that's my diagnosis, right, of how do I improve. And then what flows out of that diagnosis is materials. Okay, now I know where I'm not great, so what materials do I need to solve that problem? In this case, I would be teaching my sales guys about closure techniques. So I might go out and do some research about closure and look up various close techniques and talk with my customers about what's causing them not to close and see if we can adjust those things about either our sales materials or our product. Materials and adjustments are what flow out of your diagnosis. And then what else does it allow me to do? Allocate resources. So once I know that, who in my company needs to know about this stuff? Maybe my production person needs to know that I'm about to close 4 deals because they're going to have to produce the product, or my shipping, or my warehouse, or I can show this pipeline to various people in my company and make their jobs easier. I can also allocate internal resources. I can say I want more sales, my senior sales guys to step in at this point in the process because they're better at closing than my junior guys, and my junior guys can use that extra time to go generate more leads from the market. So I can allocate my own personal skill set resources accordingly inside my sales team. And then also it leads to projections. I can start to answer my boss or the board of directors or whoever that says, how much are you going to close? How much sales are you going to do next quarter or next month, next year? I can start to say, well, I've watched this for 6 months and I have a relatively high probability of knowing that 4 companies are going to close out of every 100 I talk to. So given my resources, I can project what I'm going to close. And of course that flows through to dollars at the end. And that's what happens after the end of the month, is reporting what happened. I say dollar bills, meaning how many did I close? How many deals got done? And where did they come from? And why did I generate that amount of revenue? So I can go back and look at a given month and tell my board or my boss, the reason we didn't do this much revenue or that we did so much revenue in a given month is because of whatever ratio. And then last but not least, long-term planning flows out of that. I can say, okay, what are we going to do? What do I need long-term? What are we going to change so that I can sell more? It's actually a fairly clever piece of the pipeline process that so much flows out of the pipeline. The pipeline becomes one of your key resources that drives a lot of different things in your business. So hopefully it's clear that maintaining a pipeline, an accurate pipeline, and really thinking hard about each of those levels and how you define them is really important, because how do I know what I'm doing good or bad? How do I know what to improve? How do I know what to build to improve it? Who do I put on the case internally in my company? What am I going to close? Am I going to generate any revenue? All of that flows out of it. So whenever you find someone at a company that's confused about why they're not selling and they can't figure it out and they sort of have theories, you should be able to ask them these questions, and it'll lead you to understand whether or not they're using a pipeline to appropriately diagnose their sales process.